I hope this analogy can help people go deep and understand what not to do in life. Okay, first of all, most parents would never do this. But let's say you had to go on a cruise and you couldn't find a babysitter, but one of the babysitters responds that has a record of multiple sex offenses against boys, and your son is a boy. But you really, really want to go on that cruise, and this guy's reformed and he's been out of jail for a year. He only has 4 rapings of children. So your mother and father decide that it's okay. Then you get raped. You tell your mother and father, hey, that babysitter you got me did something he was not supposed to. And then your mother and father act surprised and go, that couldn't have happened. That never happened. That wouldn't have happened. I asked them. We called him on the phone. He said that you're lying. That never happened. Don't be surprised when you hire a sex offender to babysit your kids that your kids are then coming up to you and saying something bad happened. The problem with a lot of adults today is they'll do something dangerous, like hire a known sex offender as their babysitter. Then their children will come up saying they got hurt. And then the parents act all surprised, kind of like that kid on the news. The parents are buying a gun for their 15-year-old, 14-year-old child. The kid is getting violent, watching violent movies. He's wearing like a goth. He's shooting things. He's hurting other people. He's punching other people. He's getting in fist fights every week at school. And you bought him a gun that's not locked. So you bought your son a gun and it's not even locked up. And your son knows that's his gun, not daddy's gun. That's his gun. And then don't act surprised when he shoots that gun. If that kid goes to play with his gun and shoots his gun and somebody gets hurt, don't act surprised. Don't go, how could my son ever fire a gun that was his? I mean, we saw him playing with toy guns for 10 years, but we never thought playing with toy guns, getting in fights in school, then buying a gun for my child, and then telling my child that that's his gun, and then leaving the gun box unlocked. We never thought that that would amount to anything. Don't do that type of shit. You see it on the TV. My own father and mother did it to me. If you're gonna hire a sex offender to babysit your kids, don't be surprised when your kids come up saying they're hurt. If you're gonna buy a gun for your child, tell your child it's his gun at the age of 14. Leave the gun box unlocked. Let your child play with guns. Let your child shoot the guns. Let your child do all this. Don't be surprised when your child wants to shoot that gun and gets in trouble. This is the problem today a lot with my parents, is that they make decisions that are obviously bad, that can clearly be thought out. And then they're surprised when I come up to them and say, hey, I'm seriously hurt. I have serious disabilities. I have serious illnesses. Then they're like, well, that can't be true. What? What are you, fucking nuts? Did you just forget the last 25 years? Have you forgotten everything you saw with your own eyes? Did you forget about my mother telling you that me bumping in the furniture is self-harming? Did you forget about all the pills you were having me take? Did you forget about the overdose? Did you forget about me speaking about the overdose at doctors? Did you forget I was trafficked all over the country? Did you forget that my mother used to hit me with a ruler? Did you forget that your grandson was afraid to visit him and crying all the time? Did you forget that all your children said that she was nuts? What the hell? Did you forget that I was so skinny and so underweight that I was having to be fed bars to stay alive? Did you forget that doctors were worried about my health? Did you forget that you put me in ballet for a coordination issue at the same time doctors were worried about a neurological issue where I wasn't able to move my body properly and there was a big change in my body, a big change in my arm movements, my speech and everything? So much of a change that the teachers were very worried calling home, putting me in physical and speech therapy. Have you just not cared enough to look into all that? Like I said, if you're going to hire a babysitter, and you find out he's a sex offender, and then a month later your kid comes up saying something bad happened, don't then just forget, oh, wait a minute, I read his resume. Oh, wait a minute, I forgot his whole resume. I forgot that he was a sex offender when we hired him. What? That's your child. What are you doing to that child? You're telling me that you forgot that you hired a sex offender? My own father, you're telling me you forgot that your son was ill? You're telling me you forgot all these horrible actions that lead up to something bad? And you see this a lot in society. People making very dangerous choices or witnessing things that are gonna be bad, and when the bad stuff happens and people bring it to them and say, hey, this is what you did, they're like, well, that couldn't have happened. I know I saw a lot, but I mean, I'm a perfect person. I'm an angel. That couldn't have been me. I couldn't have hired a sex offender to watch my kid and anything happened. We hired him and he was fine. No, you're just lying. No, no, no. He didn't stick his dick up your bum. No, that never happened. Stop crying. You were never raped by that guy. Yes, Daddy, he did. Yes, Daddy, he did. Now, this is an analogy for a parent that might have went through something, and then when the trouble comes, they don't want to admit or handle it. It happens a lot in society. It happened on the news recently. We had like a 14-year-old kid take a gun and shoot up a bunch of stuff. And what happened before that? This was one of the first mothers and fathers to be charged with a crime, and it's because they acted just like my mother and father. They made very, very dangerous, bad choices, buying their kid a gun. Now, for me, I never hurt anybody. I never took a hammer to anybody. I never sliced anybody with a knife. I never got in fights on a monthly basis. People usually attacked me in the programs because they wanted something of mine. You know, my father bought me an iPad and they wanted, so they beat me up and take my iPad or something like that. Now, I did learn just to fucking hit them back and cause as much pain as possible, and that will stop them from trying to do it again. And yet, after you get robbed and multiple times, you learn that the best way to stop that from reoccurring over and over is to put up a fight. And that's the only type of fights I ever got into. That's it. People trying to hurt me for my stuff or just trying to hurt me in general because they're psycho. There's a lot of psycho people my mother put me in danger with. Like, for instance, I had like a kid right next to me that was hitting their grandmother with a hammer. Yes, that's what my mother wanted me to have a roommate. He could have been my roommate if he was in the next room over, but in any world, I mean, he was in the same treatment center as me. What did I do? I did a science experiment. He hit his grandmother with a hammer. And these are the people my mother wants me hanging out with. Not only that, my mother wants me doing naked squats in front of strange men and strange women. Yes, my mother signed paperwork for me to get naked, squat, and as long as the person was a male, they had to put on gloves and check my asshole to make sure I'm not bringing anything in. So they made you go get naked, do squats, and if they wanted to double check, they would have you spread your cheeks, or if you didn't want to spread your cheeks, they would put their hands on you and spread them. I'm a 12-year-old, 13-year-old going through this. This is what my mother and father wanted to put me through because I did a science experiment. I held one match to some slug slime. So I must be some crazy serial killer, right? That's my mother's fantasies. I held a match to slug slime, so she's acting like I'm going out burning down buildings and killing cats. That's a nuts. My mother was so much of a fantasy maker. She loved to make up mental illnesses. She loved attention. She loved making up stories about her son. I mean, next thing you know, she's going to try to make me out to be a serial killer. I was afraid my mother was going to do something with that unregistered gun she had. Yes, my mother and father had a gun that wasn't registered, that was like 50 years old, belonged to a dead person that would never come back to them. That scares the living shit out of me with my mother acting like she did. I mean, you know, if she fucks up an IOD or something off pills she gave me, she could just blow my brains out and put that in my hand and say I committed suicide, and then everybody believes another one of her stories. I'm dead. And this was actually something I really worried about. I worried about something happening to me and then my mother making up a story with that gun. Because my mother was making up stories constantly. When she drank too much and got into trouble for it, She blamed me for 2 weeks and then came clean. When I won a swimming medal, she got me drugged and made up stories to the doctor. When I was having side effects from medications, she made up stories and twisted those side effects into every fantasy she could remember. During an overdose, she covered it up. She did, I mean, just refer to these videos. I mean, I'm just being as honest as I can, but when I make them short like that, when I abbreviate or try to give you it short, it really doesn't give you the context you need. So refer to my other videos for context, like the overdose, or like when my mother ended up beating me with a ruler, or when my mother was drugging me with pills, or some of the stories she was making up, or the swimming medal, or the lies, or the manipulations, or the brainwashing, or the moving me around and trafficking of me. If you need to know more about those, refer to my other videos where I go into detail and I just talk through my PTSD memories that have been bothering me for 25 years. And a lot of other people have come up to me asking me about this stuff. Like I had multiple teachers come up to me asking what's wrong with my mother. Why is she acting like a fucking nut? Your mother, and then after they keep on trying to help me with my mother being a nut, on the third day, they say, "You poor kid. Sorry about your mother. We tried." I get that from my brother. My brother goes, "You poor kid. Sorry about your mother." My nephew goes, "You poor kid. Sorry about your mother. And I'm afraid to visit now." And I got my teachers going, "Oh, we'll try to help. We'll try to help." And then later, "Oh, you poor kid. Sorry about your nutty mother." Anybody who spent any real time getting to know my real mother, my mother's side of craziness, because she put on a good show with friends. She would act stuck up and rich and keep it together with friends and her friends and when she was at dinner. But the minute she got back in the car, crazy Patricia was back. She started making up fantasies. Like one time she forgot a birthday, so she said that they used a fake ID in a restaurant that scanned in properly, that clearly wasn't fake, and that they were willing to break the law in front of them, and that she should be punished, and all this real attitude type, that it looked like that, oh, yeah, man, that this person did something wrong, coming up with fantasies again. The minute she got in the car, she couldn't wait to come up with the fantasy. She was holding that back all through dinner. She wanted to say something. She wanted to make up that fantasy in front of them, but she knows if she did, they would get mad and storm out and prove to her that she's full of shit. She's only allowed to make up fantasies to Zach's doctor, mine. She's able to make up fantasies to my doctor, and they'll allow it. My father will allow it. Everybody will allow her to make up fantasies about her son, Zach. But they don't allow her to make up fantasies about Tim, no fantasies about Seth, no fantasies about Alice. You can talk about those in the car. You can talk about those fantasies with Zach. You can talk about those fantasies with Henry, but no telling anybody else those fantasies. But the more they spent time with her, the more they heard and saw these fantasies my mother had. Like one of them, that I was a pet of hers, lesser than a dog, so she can do whatever she wants. Now, she said this out loud many times, and she also treated me like this many times. That was very weird. Like one time I was on the couch with her. She threw me off the couch and brought the dog up. I was laying on the floor. Then she said, "Lay flat." So I laid flat. Then she said, "Lay flatter." So I laid as flat as I could. She said, "Lay flatter." So at this point, I flattened out my feet and my head, but my body can't get any flatter. Then she says, "No, flat." And she's about to get up and kick me or stomp me or do something to me. The whole family was horrified at this dog treatment and said, "No, no, stop treating him like that. No." And they all got horrified again. Yes, my mother was horrifying people, teachers, family members, horrifying them by hurting me. Her own grandson was afraid of her and visiting her because all he watched was her hurt me, make up stories about me, and punish me for things I didn't do. It got to the point where we had a game called When in Doubt, Blame Zach. Like if they just wanted to fuck with me, they make up something like, "Zach, shut up," and then my mother come in there like a lunatic screaming. Even though there was no voice from me, there was nothing. All my mother heard was somebody else say, "Zach, shut up." And she would come in there screaming like a lunatic, "You, Zach!" Or sometimes would be playing with toys. My mother grabbed me, bring me in another room, start smacking me for a ruler for nothing, just to show her authority off to other children. Now, my My brother's child, she wasn't allowed to touch. So every so often, she would beat the crap out of me with a ruler. So that way it would get back to my brother Tim. That way she could give a message to him. The message is, I could do this to your son. That's the message. I wasn't doing anything. Seth wasn't doing anything. She just wanted to make sure that her grandson saw me take a good ruler beating to the face, and that way the message would get back to Tim, and that way Tim would be like, oh, how dare her, she could do that to my son. But she didn't. She did it to her son that was an orphan, so it was okay to do this type of shit to me. But it was a message that, oh yeah, this is a real parent. So yeah, my mother was doing crazy ass stuff, and now I have to suffer for the rest of my life. Also, the Social Security that I was supposed to be living off of while I work, my father drained away and made a bunch of illegal mistakes that have crashed that, as well as because they got Social Security on a bunch of made up fantasies. I can't go along with lies. If I go along with lies, eventually I'll get caught and they'll take it away. So I definitely can't get Social Security from my mother's lies. I have to be honest about all my disabilities. I got to be honest with the doctors. I got to prove every illness. They got to monitor me. They got to do brain scans. And that's all I'm doing. I'm just being honest with what everybody sees and other everybody sees, and the seizures, the falls, the scars, the bleeding, all that type of stuff. Meanwhile, we got a bunch of made up 15 years of made up fantasies on my medical record that don't help one bit. All they do is give me drugs. I can walk into any doctor's office and get a whole pile of drugs. I can get Percocet, Xanax, Ritalin. I can get Thorazine, Seroquel. I can get just about any drug I want, except for epilepsy medication, what I need, or treatment for whatever's going on with me for the last 25 years. That I can't get. But if I want drugs to get stoned, I'm hooked up thanks to my mother and father. Yeah, my mother and father hooked me up with the good stuff. I can get all the best drugs. But as far as treatments for actual disorders, no, my mother and father made sure I never would get any treatment for my disabilities that were real.